Good morning, everybody. I'm Mark Nykirk, Director of the Scripps Howard Center for Civic Engagement at Northern Kentucky University. And we are at the Boone County Public Library in Hebron, Kentucky today, this morning, for the Northern Kentucky Forum. Our center is partnered with the three public libraries in Northern Kentucky to present the Northern Kentucky Forum, which is designed as a place where we can have civil and civic dialogues on public issues. And wish you, those of you who are with us virtually, too bad you can't be here. We have coffee and donuts, but join us when you can. This is, I think, our first morning forum that has been in person in a little over 2 years. So particularly welcome the live audience, the in-person audience with us this morning, and we'll be doing more of this. And we've also learned over the past 2 years the value of hybrid events. So we're doing more of those, and we're happy to have with us this morning the students from NKU who are with Norse Media and doing the production for today's event. So Norse Media, thank you. They've been with us over the past couple of years as we've moved into the virtual world a little more. So happy to do that. I invite everybody to look at nkyforum.org, our website. You'll see our events. The next one, the event that we'll have is on November the 18th, a day after the May primary, and we'll be unpacking that primary a little bit with 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans to see what the returns tell us and what they might tell us about what's coming up in the general election. So RSVP for that. We'd love to have you. That will be same format, hybrid event, so we'd love to have you in person. We'll be at the Kenton County Public Library in Erlanger for that event, but there is also a virtual option, so that's November the 18th. So I invite you to take a look at the forum site and RSVP, and hope you can be with us. This morning we're going to take a look at the results of the 2020 census. The census guides a whole lot of things in the public policy realm, both for government and but also business. Looks at, of course, at the census data, and nonprofits and educators. So we have with us this morning Dr. Matt Ruther from the State Data Center, which is located at the University of Louisville. Matt was with us a few years ago, but prior to the 2020 census, to take a look at the numbers, and that proved to be a popular forum. So we thought we'd have him back now that we have a new set of numbers, and I'll turn it over to him to just a minute. I want to let everybody know that we'll take questions toward the end. Live audience, all you got to do is raise your hand. Virtual audience, there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Type the question in there, and we will monitor those and get those asked. The State Data Center is, while located at the University of Louisville, is a resource for all of us statewide. I use it constantly, to tell you the truth. A rich array of data there is just immeasurable value if you're doing grants or trying to analyze something in public policy realm. So I invite you to take a look at the site as well. But Matt will give you a little guidance on that. Your show. He promises, I told him that he's promised a song and dance. So if you don't get that, ask a question, demand it.
You absolutely do not want to see that. It's terrifying. So thank you for having me back. Like Mark was saying, the State Data Center is a Census Bureau partner. So we have the Census Bureau in DC, has a bunch of regional offices, and those regional offices have state offices, and we're one of those state offices. We were established at the University of Louisville in 1979. We don't actually keep any data, there anymore. Back in the day, we had all the discs that the census had. The census would come out with the discs and the books. This really, really big space, but nowadays we don't have any of this stuff. We really just help people get what they need because everything is available online at this point. So the decennial census. So as you are probably aware, the decennial census happened at a very inopportune time. There were several elements that made this census particularly challenging. There was the talk of the citizenship question that began in 2017, 2018, which we expect hindered turnout a little bit. There was this pandemic that happened exactly in April, on April 1st, which is April 1st, 2020, which is Census Day, which really made it difficult to get responses and has postponed or delayed everything since then. And the Census Bureau has started this new differential privacy program or process to anonymize the data better, which is also taking longer. So we actually had very little data from the 2020 census out yet. All we've gotten so far is what's called the apportionment data, which basically says how many states, how many representatives each state gets, and the redistricting data, which is used by states and localities to redistrict their districts. We don't have any data on age, gender, housing units, any of this type of stuff. All we really have at this point is total population counts and populations by race, ethnicity, which are required for the Voting Rights Act. So what I'm going to present is partially from the decennial census, and then I'm going to go a little bit further than that, talk about some population projections that we've done at the State Data Center, talk about some data from the American Community Survey, which is what I call the good data, the data on education and income and things of that nature that are more interesting than just people. So they are people, but more interesting than just population counts. So Kentucky's population in the census was about 4,505. It was up 3.8, almost 4% from 2010. It's the 34th fastest growing state, which is not particularly great. However, many of the states around us, West Virginia, Illinois, and Ohio, grew slower than us. So it's not a terrible growth rate. I'll talk more about this as we go forward. For the most part, I'm going to talk about northern Kentucky, which is the 7-county region here. At some points, I'll talk about just Boone, Campbell, and Kenton, because this is really the bulk of the population here. But I want to start with the Cincinnati metropolitan area. Of course, if you're not familiar, you're in the Cincinnati metropolitan area right now. It's a 16-county region. It extends from Bracken County down in the southeast up to Union County in east central Indiana. Of course, what we're going to be focusing on today is these 7 counties here in northern Kentucky. But overall, the Cincinnati MSA has just under 2.25 million people. It's the 30th largest MSA in the country. It used to be 26th. It's since been passed by some of the faster growing places, Las Vegas, Charlotte, Austin. And so it is sort of growing, but not growing nearly as fast as other regions of the country. So this is what our population changes look like since 1990. The red line here is the Cincinnati MSA. The blue line here is northern Kentucky itself, and that's the 7-county region. And so both populations are growing. Actually, northern Kentucky is growing faster than the Cincinnati MSA itself, so it's, in terms of the population here in Cincinnati, it's becoming a larger share of the population over time. Our growth here is faster than the rest of Kentucky. So we're at about 7% in northern Kentucky. Of course, the state is at 4%, so we're growing faster than the state itself. Among the individual counties, of course, and I think you probably already know this because you're from here, Boone County is the fastest growing county in the northern Kentucky area, grew 15% between 2010 and 2020. Campbell and Kenton counties also grew at slightly smaller rates. And several of the counties, Pendleton, Bracken County, Gallatin and Grant grew just a little bit, are actually losing people. And we see this across the state. Rural counties are losing residents to more urban or really suburban counties over time. Of course, the whole region is about 454,000 people, so this is maybe a sixth of the population of the Cincinnati MSA. And of course, although Boone County is growing fastest, Kenton County remains the largest population center in the region. So among the cities among the cities in the region, Covington remains the largest. The cities in northern Kentucky, there's a lot of them, but none of them are actually really, really big, right? Not like we see in other places. Nothing sort of matches Cincinnati in size. Covington is the largest, it's about 40,000 people. Then we have Florence and Independence, Erlanger, Fort Thomas. These large dots here are the largest cities. The smaller dots are the sort of the next 5. And then these blue dots here are what are called census designated places. These are places that aren't actually cities, but they are treated as such by the Census Bureau. So for example, Francisville, which I think is like really close to where we are now, is not an actual city. It has no city government, but the Census Bureau counts population for it, like it was a city. So although these are our largest cities, the fastest growing list looks a little bit different. Here we have our fastest growing cities: Walton, Union, Alexandria, Independence. All of these are in the sort of the skirt of the MSA, sort of on the outskirts. Of course, you know, Walton, this 50% population growth, very, very high. It's a much smaller city, so you know this growth doesn't actually translate to a lot of people. However, when we look at most new residents, we can see where the actual population is increasing the most. So over the last 10 years, Independence has gained about 4,000 people. You can really see this if you drive through it. It's very clear that there's been high population growth here. Several other places, Union, Francisville, Florence, Alexandria, all have gained about 2,000 people during this time. So I'm going to show a bunch of these maps. I'm a geographer at heart, so I have a lot of maps. I hope these are, you know, they all look really clear to me. If you're not a map person, maybe that's not exactly the case. But these are all going to be exactly the same sort of scale. This is the Boone County, Kenton County, Campbell County. You can see the I-71, I-75 corridor here, I-275 here. Of course, the river Covington there in the top. So this is sort of to get you situated here. And these are showing neighborhood population changes. Here I'm counting neighborhood, I'm calling a neighborhood a census tract. This is the data that we have. The census has divided counties up into smaller tracts. There are about 6,000 people, give or take, although they vary. We use these as proxies for neighborhoods. Although, you know, in these suburban areas, neighborhood doesn't have the same context as it does in an urban area. But you can see here where all of the growth is occurring. The darker blues here are the higher growing places. These places have gained more than 1,000 residents over the last decade. The sort of lighter blues here are also growing fast. And then in the more urban parts of the area, most of the neighborhoods are either sort of stagnant or some are actually shrinking over this time. The fastest growing neighborhoods in the city are actually in an unincorporated area. Part of this is in the city of Florence. Part of it sort of borders on Union, but most of this is unincorporated. So you're talking about I-75 down by the Richwood exit, or to the west of the Richwood exit. And these neighborhoods have all gained about 2,500 people. And so when you think of a neighborhood as having somewhere around 6,000, this is a really big change, right? So you're seeing really, really rampant growth in these areas. At the same time, we've seen some neighborhoods. There's actually only 3 neighborhoods in northern Kentucky that have lost people over the last decade. Two of them are actually in Newport. One of them is where the Ovation development was going to go, and a bunch of the housing was torn down there. So this population loss here is not particularly unexpected. We see this oftentimes. To my understanding, this development has not gone through. So we'll see what happens, what transpires there. Central Newport also had a small population loss. And then we had a population loss down in the Wilder area. So sort of along Licking Pike and the Licking River there. So now I'm going to talk about some of the particular population segments, just to give you an idea of what the population here looks like. And in all of these, I'm going to give you the last couple of decades of population share, and then what the U.S. And Kentucky as a state sort of look like. So you can compare what Northern Kentucky looks like relative to these places. So among the non-Hispanic black population, Northern Kentucky is not particularly diverse in this respect. Our black population is about 4%. It has been growing relatively quickly, but it lags behind what we see in, say, the MSA itself, which is about 12%, which is the same as the US. And it's even less diverse in terms of the black population than the state of Kentucky, in which is 8% black. Although within all of the counties here, this black population is in fact growing. This is what the black population looks like by neighborhood. Of course, we can see the largest concentration is here in the more urban areas, in Covington, in Newport, a little bit here in Florence. We have much smaller black populations, right around, well, somewhere between 0 and 1% in all of this tan area in the outskirts of the metropolitan area. The largest black population share is this census tract in East Covington. It's about 58.5% black. This is actually a fairly small percentage for the neighborhood with the largest share. So for example, in Louisville, we have 4 or 5 census tracts that are 95% black or more. So you do see census tracts with larger black population shares in Cincinnati, but this is the largest in northern Kentucky. So the Hispanic Latino population is growing very rapidly here, much faster than the black population, although it remains well, it actually remains about the same as the black population, but overall in the MSA, it's smaller than the black population. So you can see across northern Kentucky, about 4% of the population is Hispanic. Incidentally, we do expect that there were some undercounts of Hispanics and of the black population. In fact, most of the minority populations, we do expect that there were some undercounts from the census. They have released a sort of a report that says there were undercounts, but they haven't really said where they were located. So northern Kentucky, about 4% Hispanic. You can see how this is much lower than what we see across the U.S. as a whole. The U.S. is nearly 1/5 Hispanic. In fact, northern Kentucky is a little bit less Hispanic than Kentucky as a whole, which is pretty surprising because Kentucky is not particularly diverse in this respect. Across the MSA, across northern Kentucky, the concentration of Hispanic population looks actually quite similar to the concentration of the black population. Again, we see large shares in the Covington area and northern Kenton County, here in Florence, and also out by the airport. And this is not particularly surprising. These warehousing jobs attract a lot of Hispanic Latino workers. Of course, although these concentrations are similar to the black population, we're talking much smaller numbers overall. So at most, our largest population share of Hispanics is, in fact, in this neighborhood in eastern Florence. So here we have I-75. This is Dixie Highway, and this is Mount Zion Road. And so this tract here is the largest Hispanic population share in the region. It's about 28%. Okay, and in fact, all of the neighborhoods around here are also similarly high. This just happens to be the largest. So the Asian population. So again, this is a very fast-growing population. It's actually growing faster than the Hispanic population, although it's even smaller to start with. So The sort of the trend here in race ethnicity in the region is that it's very, there's not a tremendous amount of diversity, but it's increasing rapidly. So among the Asian population, again, across the U.S., we have about 6% of the population is Asian. Here in Northern Kentucky, it's about 1.5%. This is very similar to what, we see the same thing in all of the counties. We actually see the same, very similar number in Cincinnati itself. You can see the growth though. This population is increasing by 30 to 40% every 10 years, which is a substantial amount of growth. The Asian population is a little bit more bimodal, sort of, in how it sorts residentially. There's typically in many places, there's a lower, a more disadvantaged Asian population that tends to live in more heavily immigrant areas. And then there's a wealthier Asian population that tends to suburbanize, basically. And that's what we see here. The largest Asian population in the region is here in Florence and Union. But again, although these are large this is the largest share of this particular population, we're still talking about fairly small numbers. So we're talking about 10% of the population being Asian. And of course, the Asian population is extremely broad. So we're talking East Asian, China, Japan, Southeast Asian, Vietnamese and Thai, Indian, and Pakistan, and the countries surrounding India. Our most heavily Asian neighborhood, again, is here in southern Florence, the area around Pleasant Valley Road. Again, 10% Asian, not particularly large. Comparatively, some of the census tracts in Louisville are almost 25% Asian. And finally, the non-Hispanic other race population. So this other race population, I have collapsed a couple of different categories here. This would include American Indian and Alaska Natives. It would include Native Hawaiians, other Pacific Islanders. It would include anyone that checked the box of some other race, although we don't necessarily know what that race is at this particular time. And it includes anyone that indicated more than one race. So if someone was multiracial, say black and white, they would be included in this group also. This is in fact the fastest growing group, both here in Northern Kentucky and nationwide. Part of this is in how the Census Bureau has changed how it counts race over time. So in this last census in particular, it was, I can't really explain the context, but it was sort of easier to indicate that you were multiple races. And so we see this really big increase in the population claiming more than one race. Part of this is also the rise of DNA testing type kits, because people will see what their ancestry looks like and maybe see, you know, a long time ago we may have had a little a different race here, and so we're also seeing some of that. There's not a whole lot of variation here. We see a very similar percentage in the U.S. and Kentucky across the different counties within the area. So I'm going to skip those two because I'm bored with talking about them. So finally, let me just talk for one second about the non-Hispanic white population. Of course, you can sort of infer what the white population looks like based on what we just saw with the other populations. But what is interesting about this population is that it is in fact shrinking across most counties. With the exception of Boone County, where it's growing by, the white population is growing by about 5%. And remember, Boone County was growing by about 18%. So the bulk of that growth was coming from elsewhere. Most counties are actually losing the non-Hispanic white population. So some of this is that this population is moving even further out. So we're seeing it move into Grant County, Pendleton County, and part of it is that this population has lower fertility than most of the minority populations. Of course, across the United States, only 58% of the population is non-Hispanic white. It's much, much higher here. We're actually have a larger white population share than the state of Kentucky as a whole, which is again surprising. Kentucky is not known nationally for its diversity, so this is a really very, very high number. So, where does this population, so population lives in one of two places. Almost everyone lives in a housing unit, okay, or in a household within a housing unit. We also have what are called group quarters. Group quarters are unusual or atypical living situations. The largest group quarters, there's sort of four main group quarters types. One is prisons, one is dormitories, one is senior facilities or nursing homes, and one is military installations. Of course, we have no military installations, so this is not listed here. But this is the counts of the group quarters populations across the 7-county area. You can see we have a number of individuals in prisons, senior facilities, dormitories, and this other non-institutions. These tend to be, they can be other types of senior facilities. They can also be shelters. This is where the homeless population the houseless population, to the extent that it's getting counted in the census, would probably be listed under these other non-institutions. The reason why the group quarters are important is that this was a particular population segment that was very difficult to count. So, you know, I work at a university, and in March, the mid-March of 2020, all the students went home, right? And they should still be counted where they were. They weren't there anymore. There was a lot of confusion over how to do this. And so ultimately, the state had to sort of step in and say, this is how many people sort of should be everywhere. We're not sure exactly how well these turned out. I contacted a bunch of universities and prison facilities, and the counts seem to be good. There is one very interesting finding that I'll talk about in just a second. But some of our largest group quarters facilities, so among dormitories, there are two census blocks in Campbell County that have large dorm facilities. Of course, these are NKY facilities. There's also a large student housing population in Kenton County around Thomas More College. We have two large prison facilities. One is in Boone County, the Boone County Detention Center, the Campbell County Jail. Surprisingly missing from there is Kenton County Jail. And finally, we have a large senior population in this area, sort of around Florence Mall, or to the west of Florence Mall. So the reason the Kenton County Jail came up is because Kenton County showed in the census 20 people in prison, 20 people in jail at this particular date and time. And when you see what Boone County and Campbell County reported, this is a really small number, right? This really matters quite a bit because prisoners, as they should be, are counted as any other resident, right? So if you miss, say, 500 people in prison, you're missing 500 residents and 500 residents worth of dollars that city should be getting. I've spoken with Joe Meyer, the mayor. There is a program that allows you to, I don't want to say challenge census results. You can't change the census. What has been released is official. There's no going back. However, you can change what's called the estimates base, so going forward, they'll adjust the population if there was a miscount. And so we are trying to check that particular area for this miscount. So how does this change happening? So there's three ways that a population can change. One is through births, One is through deaths, and one is through migration or population movement. Across the 7 counties in the area, you can see what our births and deaths look like. This is over a 10-year period, so they're big numbers. In nearly every county, in fact, in every county, births outnumber deaths, which is a really good sign for population increase, right? So you're seeing natural population increase. This is not true in many places. Many counties in the state are seeing more deaths than births. So you're seeing this natural decline, coupled with outmigration is a recipe for, of course, population decline. Most of the population, these two things, births and deaths, very easy to count. We have records of them. Migration, much more difficult to count. You don't tell anybody. Well, you do tell people when you're moving, but they don't report it to anybody else. And so we sort of back into this based on how the population has changed. And you can see migration, both foreign and domestic, 8,000 people in Boone County, so a lot of people are moving to Boone County. A lot of people are also moving to Campbell County. We see negative migration in many of these places, so people are moving out, again, of these rural counties. One very interesting case, at least interesting to me, is here in Kenton County, where you see basically no net migration, but this is the result of very high international migration, so a lot of immigrants moving in, and then negative domestic migration, so natives moving, native-born U.S. citizens moving out. So this is a graph that I had put on Twitter. I put on Twitter earlier this year, and I got 70 likes, which is really a really big deal for the State Data Center. So we were the tweet of the month of the State Data Center network. So I hate to brag, but that was actually true. So this is births and deaths in the state of Kentucky, going back to 1960, and there's a very clear trend here, right? So births are declining, deaths are increasing. We're going to have convergence soon. In fact, here in 2020, of course, this is the result of COVID, but deaths actually outnumbered births for the first time probably in history, certainly since the Spanish flu in 1918, 1919. Going forward, I would probably expect this to shift a little bit going once COVID deaths have sort of stabilized. But going forward, of course, in the very near future, like the next couple of years, this is going to be the rule rather than the exception. This is the entire state. Of course, in northern Kentucky, this convergence hasn't reached this point. They're coming together, but there's still a lot of distance between them. We would expect births and deaths to sort of become equal in Campbell County in 2030, in Kenton County in 2045, and in Boone County in 2050. So, one of the things that we do at the State Data Center is population projections. So projections are looking at what the population looks like in the future, right? So these are preliminary based on the 2020 census. But what we see here, these are population projections for the entire northern Kentucky area. The red here, or the maroon, is the population projections that we are working on currently. The blue is the population projections that we did 5 years ago. As you can see, our new projections have declined a little bit, so we're expecting less population growth than we would have expected 5 years ago. This is not the result of COVID. This is primarily the result of these declining birth rates and also declining migration over the last 5 years. We are sort of avoiding including COVID in these results because it's an exceptional, we don't expect this death rate to continue into the future. Among the individual counties, again, we see Boone County, we project it to continue growing the fastest. Kenton County also showing positive growth. But many of these counties, Bracken County, Gallatin County, Pendleton County, we expect to lose population over the next 20 years. Campbell County, we expect to remain pretty much flat. Overall, we expect about 8% population increase between now and 2040, although, of course, we do projections every 5 years, so these numbers will change as we get more information. So one of the big trends that demographers have been harping on for some time now, if you have not heard this, population aging. So this is the 2010 decennial census, the 2020 decennial census. Here we have in blue the population, the adult population 18 or over, in red the population younger than 18. And what we see over this 10 years is that this population has increased by 9%. This population is essentially flat. So, of course, people are living longer, there's fewer births. This has been going on for some time now. I don't think that, this is sort of a commentary now, I don't think that we understand how to make this work with the social systems that we have set up, such as Social Security. But this is something that's continuing and is going to need to be, at some point, is going to need to be brought into focus. So demographers love population pyramids. These are population pyramids. These are basically 5-year age counts, 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, up to 85 plus, males and females for each of the different counties, population percents. And we love population pyramids because they tell us a lot about a population just by this one graphic. So this is what the entire northern Kentucky area looks like. You see this type of pyramid when you have a sort of a mature population. I don't mean mature like old, but mature like developed. So the number of births each year is actually very similar to the number of the percent of adults in each age category. You get sort of a rectangle instead of an actual pyramid. So we don't here in the United States see pyramids very often. You see them in other countries that have much higher birth rates. We more often see this more of a rectangle. So the different counties have different patterns. So this here is Boone County. You can see that these sort of divots here around the 20 to 30 age, the 20 to 35 age groups. These are residents leaving for college, typically, and residents that are moving from Boone to probably more urban areas. And then you see a big sort of retraction at age 40 to 55. Of course, this is people coming back to raise families or people raising families. We see sort of an opposite pattern in Campbell County and Kenton County. In Campbell County, we see this, the bulge here at the student in the 20s, the early 20s. Of course, this is most likely part of NKU. And in Kenton County, we see this bulge a little bit higher in the 30s. These are typically young adults, millennials, that are living in the city. So basically, start in college, move to the city, move to the suburbs, is what we sort of see in these pyramids. How am I on time?
You got another 5-7 minutes before we go to Q&A.
I might have made too many slides, it's possible. So I do want to talk about some of these other characteristics, and there's 3 things that I want to look at in particular. One is the income within the different counties in the area. Another is the level of educational attainment, and by this I mean college degree completion. And the last is the foreign-born population. So this is income, or real income, so income adjusted for inflation over time from 2000 to 2020. There's not a whole lot going on in terms of trend here. Real incomes have remained essentially flat. And this is true going back into the 80s, probably. What is interesting here is the difference in levels. Of course, this green line here is Boone County, the highest income county in the region. Here in the middle, we have Kenton and Campbell counties, along with the United States. So Kenton and Campbell sort of track the U.S. in terms of income. And then in the blue, we have the state of Kentucky, which has lower incomes overall. But all of them are sort of remaining quite stable over time. Across the neighborhoods of northern Kentucky, this darker red are the higher income neighborhoods. These are neighborhoods with household incomes of $90,000 a year or more. Again, these are the same places that population is growing, essentially. There's a couple of higher income areas in the older suburbs in Villa Hills, in Fort Thomas, but overall, most of the wealth is in this periphery. So college degree attainment. It's no surprise that that bachelor's degrees have become more prevalent over time. Going back to 1970, nearly all of the counties in northern Kentucky had about 6% of the population, the adult population, with a bachelor's degree. This has been increasing for every county for the U.S. for the state of Kentucky over time. Of course, the state of Kentucky here, again in the blue, lags the northern Kentucky counties and the U.S. as a whole in terms of bachelor degree completion. What is very interesting to me in this map is this orange line, which is Campbell County, which had been sort of lagging below the rest of the counties and is now above the rest of the counties, the largest share of the population with bachelor's degrees. I would attribute this to the presence of NKY, of course, and the instructors there. There still remain a large number of northern Kentuckians that are in this group that have done college or done some college but don't have a degree. This is a really important group because they typically have debt from college, but they don't have sort of the benefits of the degree yet. There's about 55,000 of these adults, 20% of the adult population is in this group. Across different neighborhoods, our most highly educated neighborhoods are actually closer in to the urban areas of the region. The periphery tend to be more middle educated, and then there's of course some parts of Kenton County in particular, and Campbell County, and Newport and Covington, where college degree completion is very low. And finally, the foreign-born population. So in 1970, the U.S. foreign-born population was at its lowest point over the last century. It was very high in the early 1900s, 1910, 1920, declined during World War II, bottomed out in 1970, most likely because of the economy, and has been rebounding since then. The yellow line here is the United States. Obviously, the U.S. has a lot more immigrants overall than the northern Kentucky area. All of the counties in northern Kentucky are increasing, but have these much smaller shares. The largest foreign-born population is in Boone County. It's about maybe 5.5% of the population. In general, this population looks a lot like the Hispanic Latino population. In general, in many places, these two groups there's a lot of overlap between them. And that is actually true here in northern Kentucky. And if we look where the immigrants are, primarily in the Florence area, somewhat in Covington and northern Kenton County, although looking at these numbers, the largest immigrant neighborhood is still 18% foreign-born. This isn't a tremendous number. It's not sort of like we would expect in like a Chinatown or something of that nature. So we're seeing foreign-born, but not the growth that we see in many places. So what's coming up? So if you have not checked out the Census Bureau's new data dissemination website, it's data.census.gov. They've actually made it fairly easy to use, and by easy I mean easy by Census Bureau standards, which are typically not that easy, but it's much better than what they had before. All of the data that I looked at today has come from this particular website. I skipped over the employment data. It's in the presentation. I assume that we'll be sending this out, and this is where the employment data came from. So going forward, over the rest of the year, we're expecting to see more population estimates data, new data from the American Community Survey. Again, this count question resolution, this is the challenge program that I was talking about. These responses are due by June of next year, June of 2023. And then summer of next year is when the Census 2020 data, the rest of the Census 2020 data is coming out. This is an enormous delay. So we just heard this, they just announced this week. We were expecting it in June or July. It's been postponed an additional year. So this is a really big problem because we're going to get the data in 2023, of course, and it's relatively outdated at that point in time. But this is what we have upcoming anyway. So contact information for myself. I've also put the contact information for Ron Williams. Ron is a Census Bureau employee. He works here in the state of Kentucky and in Tennessee. He is what's called a data dissemination specialist. So he will come to your organizations and give spiels like the one I'm giving now for free. I charge a whole lot to do this. That was a joke. I don't charge anything, of course. Anyway, but he is extraordinarily friendly, very gregarious. So I would encourage you, if you have questions on data, to get in touch with him. So that is all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Yes.
Is any of this data been broken down by city? I know you did a lot of counties there. Is it accessible by city yet?
You mean the race ethnicity data?
Yes.
It is available, yes.
On
The data.census.gov, yes. Sort of, I was trying to keep it reasonable. Yeah, but it is there. All that's available right now is data on total population, race, ethnicity, the number of housing units, and vacancy rates. And those are available for the nation, states, counties, cities, school districts, let me take that back, not school districts, cities, tracts, block groups, and census blocks.
And what have they said about accuracy? You said that they acknowledged it, but they haven't put any...
They have acknowledged an undercount, but, you know, every census there's an undercount. So the last census, or maybe 2 censuses ago, the undercount was children under 5. So somebody is always being undercounted. Unfortunately for the decennial census, there is no, the Census Bureau has to release it, regardless of whether it's good or not. And so this was sort of the very sad joke that demographers were making prior to the census, that you have to do the census, but you don't have to do a good census. And so we don't know exactly how this is going to break down. The state of Kentucky actually did very well in this decennial census in terms of response rates. So people responding on their own. People respond on their own, and the Census Bureau doesn't have to send anybody out. So it's you get a much higher accuracy rate when you do that. So I think that will end up okay, although nationwide there's going to be some undercounts for sure. Yes.
You said something about talking with the mayor of Covington about not really a recount, but like asking for an adjustment. Is that based upon the response rate or the fact that you just believe that your population was undercounted?
So it's actually more complicated than that, because everything that the Census Bureau does is more complicated. But basically, it's historically been designed in case there was an address that was in the wrong place. So like an address, people were counted in over here, and they should have actually been over here. Okay, that's where it arose from. This year it's been extended a little bit to if you believe that the population was missed, like what we see here. And there is, it requires a bunch of documentation. So it's a little bit, I would expect that most places that challenge or ask these to be resolved are going to be denied would be my guess. Although there seem to be some cases that are really clear, but we'll see what happens. This is sort of uncharted territory for the Census Bureau, because the census has always had issues, but nothing of the magnitude that COVID presented, basically. And if I have come across as negative towards them, I think they've done a great job. The timing was just horrendous in terms of counting people. Yes.
So I work with the Campbell County Public Library, and we have the Dolly Park Imagination Library, which sends free books to kids 0 to 5. So they age out at 5. So I'm very interested in that 0 to 5 age range and the size of it in Campbell County. And interestingly, just last week, I looked at Campbell County, what the population of 0 to 5s was, and then I went through by zip code and got the estimates, and they were higher. So what accounts for that difference? The estimate on a countywide level was lower than the estimates when I added them up by zip code.
Matt, the virtual audience wonders if you could repeat the question, because the in-person audience is not hearing.
Yes, so the question is whether, why the zip code counts are lower than the county count. Higher than the county count.
Yeah.
So you're probably looking at American Community Survey data.
Yes.
And this data has a margin of error because it's a survey, not a census. And so you will see anomalies like that, basically. I don't have a really good answer for you, but there's a confidence interval around each zip code's population and around the county's entire population. So if you sum them up, take account of these errors, they should still match up, basically.
So which one do you think has a greater confidence?
I would use whatever geography is larger, because you'll have the smaller error with the larger geographies. And zip codes, I have a whole tirade against zip codes that I won't go into here, but zip codes are not actually geographies, they're routes that the USPS follows. So the Census Bureau has not historically done data within zip codes. They just started in 2000 because the research community wanted it, but they're not good geographies to count people within for several reasons.
Can I ask one more question just about that same thing? So what is your confidence in the American community estimates overall?
I have.
Confidence in
What is my confidence in American Community Survey estimates? Super, super high. I am super confident. I don't think that it's important actually what my confidence is, because this is the only data that we have. And so either we use these numbers or we don't use any numbers. So in that context, I have a lot of confidence in them. I mean, the American Community Survey surveys about 3% of the population every year, and then it pulls data over 5 years, so you're looking at 15% of the population. This is a really large survey, for the U.S. If you look at the margins of error, which are provided, there's big margins of error, but some data guru that I really respect once said, if you see an estimate of something, there's a reason for that estimate. Like, there was something there that made this number happen, right? So it's not like they're just being made up randomly. There's something happening. So that's the best answer I can give.
Not even related to COVID. I heard that there was a lot of confidence issues with the census even before COVID started to affect it, when it first rolled out, because of people's concern about maybe phishing or spamming or all of this type of stuff, especially how they were encouraging people to do online type of work. Is there any validity to that?
Yeah, so the question is whether there was a lack of confidence in the census that might have reduced response rates. I mean, I think we always see that. I mean, the Census Bureau is, it's the main statistical agency in the United States. So it knows that these things are happening, and it has methods of trying to account for them, right? So in terms of people providing information, I got calls over the census over the census period from people that were like, I got this email, or I got this in the mail, is this valid? You know, the way that they do this by sending a letter, and then they send the survey, and then they send another letter, is meant to sort of provide some confidence in the results. I mean, I certainly think that there are people that do not fill it out, that are not counted or are miscounted because there is some allocation that happens, or imputation that happens. But I think the big, in this particular census, the big problem was the citizenship question. I think that really suppressed turnout for the Hispanic population.
Matt, a few questions from our virtual audience. First of all, kind of a user question. What's the easiest way to pull poverty information from the census data for the whole, the greater Cincinnati region MSA?
From data.census.gov. So just a little tidbit. When you go into data.census.gov, there's like a box, a giant box that they want you to type things in, and then underneath there's something that says advanced search. You always want to do the advanced search. Because once you type something in the box, it's only going to give you results that are what you typed, and in most cases, we don't type the right thing. So if you go to advanced search, you can like pick and choose, and it's a lot easier to, you'll see here, it'll be like geography, year, what type of survey, what type of topic. You can sort of filter that way. Always a better bet. But that's where you would get the poverty data for the metro area. There is also a program called the Small Area Income and Poverty Estimates that are released annually. They sort of align with the American Community Survey, but they're only available for counties and states, not for the MSA.
So could you just follow up on that? That's how you do it for the larger MSA. What if you want to get down to this more granular data that was referenced in the earlier question? So suppose you want to know data for a census tract.
You would go to the same place. So all of the data, so you're really looking, when you're looking for data, you're always looking by topic. And then the geographies are almost always going to be available for every topic. There are some cases where you can't get neighborhood level data because of suppression concerns, because small populations. But in general, something like poverty, you'll get it from the same place.
It's a question that pertains to one of your slides. You were talking about this, but maybe some clarification. How are biracial individuals counted? If someone lists multiple races, are they counted as both for the race statistics?
No, they are counted as multiple races. So the race statistics, so non-Hispanic white, non-Hispanic black, Asian, other, down, all of these are when people say only list one race. If you check any two boxes, then you go into this multiple race category. So basically the question asks, you know, what race do you consider yourself? Check all that apply. And so if you check two boxes, you're outside of that group. And in fact, I have given the really simple version of the race question. You can actually see, you know, if someone says, I am white and American Indian, you can get that count also. It gets very complicated because there's like 70 different combinations that you can choose from.
We're going to go just a little bit long. I'll warn everybody, but we have another virtual question, but I want to see if there's another question in the audience.
I was just wondering if you could repeat where you could get the poverty data. You were saying the small area, what was it called?
It's called SAIPE, S-A-I-P-E, Small Area Income and Poverty Estimates. But if you Google SAIPE, it'll be the first thing that comes up.
Quick question about the employment map. You referenced it, but we didn't go into detail. Can you kind of give me an idea? I'm with the Chamber of Commerce, so obviously it's interesting to me.
Yeah, so if you want to email me, I can tell you more, but basically there's a website called On the Map that the Census Bureau runs. It comes from unemployment insurance data, so it's a really good source of employment information. And basically you say, what is the number of workers in this area? It gives you the number of workers, the industry, the racial, age breakdowns, for any area that you choose. So like a city or a neighborhood or whatever. You can look at the people that work there, so the actual jobs in that area. You can look at the residents there, who maybe work elsewhere. You can look at origin destination, so people that are working here in Florence, where are they coming from? It's really, really, really interesting. I skipped it for time purposes, but
Thank you.
yes. It's on the website is called onthemap.ces.census.gov. But the link in this presentation, the employment data link, goes to that website. The data is called the LEHD, Longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics.
Casey, can you?
Yeah, the population estimate for Campbell, I mean, I've been at the library for 20 years, has always been negative. But I see all these subdivisions going up in Campbell and all this growth in Campbell, particularly residential growth. So how do you explain that?
So generally, so the question was on, you see a lot of growth in Campbell County and say Alexandria, Highland Heights, but the population is overall flat. Generally, this is because people are moving from the sort of further in parts of the county out. So this is a really common issue because what you see when you go outside is like there's these new houses and there's this apartment and there's all this new stuff happening. And people assume that those places are being populated by new people, right? So people that didn't live here before. But in general, those places are populated by people that are already living here that have come from other areas. So you could see the domestic migration. We don't get a tremendous amount of domestic migration. People are not moving here in droves like they are to like Texas or somewhere. So that's probably what you're seeing.
Matt, we can do one more virtual question, kind of I guess, policy, or, when you look at the numbers, how do we react? And with this question is, what impact does the census have on affordable housing in our community?
So the census numbers are used to allocate something on the order, I'm going to mess up the number, but something like $700 billion in federal programs. And some of those programs, of course, are community development block grants or other programs that might fund affordable housing. So in that context, there was this really interesting study done, I think, by George Washington University on how much the census is worth for each individual. And it was something like $3,000 per resident per year. So, if you have an undercount in the census of 100 people, that's 3,000 times 100. Somebody? $300,000 for that individual over this 10-year period. It's a lot of money. So in that context, it matters. But in terms of like how we count or what is affordable housing, the census doesn't really have any sort of, there's really no data on that.
Well, one closing question for you. You monitor the census and the projections probably daily, but certainly all the time. So when this census...
I do have a life. I do actually do other things.
Oh, well, we didn't know about that. Any surprises when you looked at the Northern Kentucky data, and likewise, any surprises when you looked at the numbers for Kentucky overall?
I was pleased with the numbers in Kentucky overall, although what the state is seeing is a lot of growth in Northern Kentucky, in Louisville, and in Lexington. And then on the eastern part and the western part and the southern part of the state, you're seeing population loss. So approximately half of the counties in the state are losing people at this point, which will probably continue and probably actually become aggravated. In terms of Northern Kentucky, I was a little surprised at the Kenton County numbers. They were a little higher. I had expected, based on what I see, I expected Boone County to be the most populous because that's all I hear about. But in fact, Kenton County is still much bigger. And most of this is because growth in independence, or a lot of this is because of growth in independence. But I was also really pleased. I'm sort of an urbanist, so I was happy to see that most of the more urban areas in Covington and Newport and whatnot are still growing, which is not what we see everywhere.
Well, let's thank Dr. Matt Ruther for being with us.
I'm so glad I don't have to be here for that day. No elections for me. Whew.